Hello and welcome to Live at Epiphan, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we have a lot of first time viewers in the chat today, which is awesome. Hello, welcome. Make yourself comfortable, get your snacks or whatever you need. My name is George, and I actually am the support manager here at Epiphan. Just to give a little introduction to myself, which our routine viewers already know that. But today we actually have a super exciting show that I'm really stoked for. We have a very special guest, and we're going to dive into that in a moment. But as we go through the show today, any questions or comments that you guys have, throw them into chat. I am watching chat. I can see everyone saying hi there. Everyone else, including me, is very excited for Wendell to be here. So that's going to be awesome, and we'll bring Wendell in just a moment. We do this show every other Thursday here, YouTube, Facebook, and such. We also do a lot of webinars. So, like, subscribe, all the socially things, and the clicks and the stuff, and whatever you want to do or not is totally fine with me. But we certainly appreciate the subscribes and the follows and the likes if you enjoy today's show, which I think will be fantastic. And of course, our special guest today is Wendell. Wendell likes to design technology, DIY enthusiast. He's also an enterprise consultant, forum moderator extraordinaire. And of course, make sure to follow him on Twitter and all the other socially things. But one of the biggest reasons we wanted to chat with Wendell was because of Level1Techs. Now, Level1Techs, for I'm sure most people in the chat know, but those who don't, Level1Techs is a great YouTube channel, Ryan, Krista, and Wendell, and basically, quote, a group of nerds who are passionate about technology and how it shapes our world. They create videos to share knowledge about tech, science, and design. And that's exactly why we're excited to have Wendell here today. So welcome, Wendell, and thank you so much for your time today.
No, thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun, exciting times, all that. All the superlatives, it's just utter nonsense. I'm a computer janitor, first and foremost.
Right. Yeah, so, I mean, the history between Level 1 and Epiphan actually goes back a number of years. You reviewed our Pearl 2 back in like 2016, I think. You
Yep.
reviewed the Webcaster X1, the Webcaster X2, AVIO, but most recently you reviewed our Pearl Nano, which is our most recent product, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But then you also did some fun stuff. You did like a little parody thing, the Level1Techs gag and that stuff. So we've had a little bit of a relationship going back over the years, which is another reason why we're so excited to have you here today and just chat with you, pick your brain. That's really what today is all about. So
I really like this gear because we are DIY. And it's like, wait, this is basically a turnkey solution. And it's like, no, you can DIY on top of the turnkey solution. That's what makes it awesome.
yeah, exactly. And that's something we hear from a lot of our customers, and that's important. But let's start kind of more at the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about your channel. Why Level 1, and what kind of got you started with the YouTube channel?
Well, level one is it's sort of an in joke. So the level one person is the person that like picks up the phone and it's like, have you tried turning it off and on again? And we get sucked into things that are a little more technical than that. But there's also sort of a kind of a deeper meaning to it too, because when you're starting out at level one, when you're starting out, you're not at level one. You're basically at level 0. And a lot of the time, it's harder to get from level 0, where you don't know anything and you don't know what you don't know how you want to start, to get to level 1. A lot of our audience is students or people that are really experienced working on their careers, but their technology is kind of like part of their life. A lot of other technology channels are like technology lifestyle, I'd say.
Right.
And we're more like, no, let's break it and do horrible things to it and see what happens. And so that's where the DIY sort of comes in.
But probably a little deeper than, of course, there's many tech channels out there that are, present themselves as tech channels, but arguably on a certain level, they're really just consumer product reviews more than anything.
Yeah, the car show, the car show with like the 3 personalities. Like I fear of like saying it for the algorithm picking it up because they're really touchy about things. But that formula works really well, and there's a lot of tech channels that follow that, where it's more about the personality than anything else. And that was one of the funny things with like the Level1Techs sort of in joke, is like it's kind of about the personalities more than the other stuff, and we got to do more content like that. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's always fun to goof around with content for sure. But I mean, speaking of content, what kind of drives you to make the bulk of your content? Is it just about education, or is it just kind of a general enthusiasm about technology and you just want to share that enthusiasm?
It really is. For me, it's mostly stuff that I would probably be working on anyway. As interesting or sad and depressing as that may be, either way, depending on how you look at it, and I want to share that enthusiasm, that sort of excitement. The joy of figuring something out is really just incredible. And some people treat that like it's something completely alien. Like you look at something and you just follow a scientific method on it in order to deduce information and synthesize something new, and somebody looks at you and is like, it's this crazy foreign moon language, when really that's just part of the human condition. And
Right.
some people have lost it, but we must recapture it or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, like you said, it's probably something you'd be doing anyways. It just
Yeah.
sometimes you just throw a camera on and then you can share it. But we all know it kind of gets a little deeper than that very quickly as a content creator. So today, as you've built your community and all these things, what does that look like in terms of your creation workflow? Like, how much are you planning out in advance these days?
It does take a lot of planning, and it does take a lot of equipment and setup. In the beginning, we were very sort of wanting to conserve equipment as much as possible. And it's like, okay, we'll set up the lights, we'll set up the camera, we'll move the cabling around, we'll do the thing, do what we need to do, and then tear it down so that we can actually build a server and run a benchmark, or build a server and do a thing. And now it's a production. Like, having to tear down and set up equipment actually kind of gets in the way of the creative process, where we can just sort of sketch it out or write it down or collaborate and do something with it online, and then we just sort of want to walk in, hit a button when the creative inspiration sort of strikes, and just sort of see how it takes shape. Anymore, I'll probably do things 2 or 3 times, kind of like a dry run, and then a rehearsal, and then just sort of flesh it out and make sure it makes sense, and then like do it for real. And it shows in some of the videos. You can definitely tell when we've done that in a way to try to explain it to people.
For sure.
I was watching a documentary on Bob Ross, and it was like, oh yeah, all the Bob Ross photos or paintings, they don't sell, and he actually did 3 different versions of them, and it's like he painted everything 3 times in order to make it look like just one on the show. Bob Ross? It's like, okay, I guess. I mean, we can sort of look at how the sausage is being made in terms of technical videos, but yeah, it's a process, and I was very surprised by that, because in doing technical things, I'm used to, okay, I've had to do this twice. I'm going to write a program to automate this, or I'm going to make my life easier, because the first 2 times I did it was horrible suffering, and I'm going to write a program so that the next time I have to fix a printer or solve a spooler issue or deploy an update or whatever, it's automated. It takes less of my time. I have less suffering. You can't really do that with videos and the creative process.
No, and it's funny. It's almost like that secret sauce that's always been there for like cooking shows, for example, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and suddenly there's thing that takes 3 hours to cook is already done. And it's partially because it's kind of having duplications of everything, and that's the magic of television. But it's not something that we often see within the new media, right? Of online content, and partly because and I'm sure this is true with you guys, it's still a relatively small team, right?
Yeah. We have 2 editors, and then it's the 3 of us, and that's it. And we get it all done, and we do almost all of the work in about 1.5 days a week to 2 days a week, something like that. I'm doing a little bit more, but things like benchmarking and stuff like that sort of has to like have a churn in the background. But then it's like, okay, we have our shooting day, and then it's like, okay, let's try to get everything done in 1 or 2 days. But the organization and the background stuff, it takes forever.
Well, yeah, exactly. You're not, all due respect to the guys at Linus Tech Tips, but you're not a a group of that size with multiple sets and a group of writers necessarily.
No, it'll probably be a long time before we could even think about getting a writer. But it is really amazing that you think about a technical video and the benefit that you get from smart people that are doing writing. That is incredibly beneficial in terms of being able to clearly communicate stuff, and also to just organize what it is you want to say.
Well, it is. I like to present, when I'm doing our webinars and things, I really love to present off the cuff, but I still have to have somewhere behind it all, at least some bullets, right?
Yeah.
At least some ideas. And I'm lucky enough here, that at Epiphan, when we're doing that type of content, I do have some writers that are excellent at their jobs and make my life so much easier to present that stuff, because I, just some outlines to keep me on track a little bit. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
always
how
great.
I like to work, and that's usually what the first draft of a video is. Is like I'll do the outline, and it's so time consuming because it's like I'll do the bullet outline, and then I'll do the video, and then I'll watch myself and basically have an argument with myself. Totally not schizophrenia, I swear. And and then it's like, okay, now I can sort of plan it out a little better, and then and then yeah, I'll shoot it, and maybe that version will be useful, or maybe that version will be useful, and I'll like splice in some stuff. And some of this I even do out of the view of the editing team, just because then they'll have 3 different versions of the video, and it's like, okay, let me try to Frankenstein something together, and it's like, no, that's going to waste a huge amount of your time. Let's not do that. I'll just do it from the top, and it'll make a lot more sense.
Right. So, kind of being a very DIY channel, and you kind of mentioned this a little bit off the top there. You guys, I said you love to be DIY, and you do, but you also really like a device like the Pearl Nano that's sitting on the desk in front of you. You've reviewed, like we said off the top, a lot of the Epiphan products, which are not always in the same vein as DIY, but sometimes they are. Of course, the most recent one was the Nano, which is I don't know if it's the most DIY friendly of our current line or not, but it's somewhere in the middle probably. Um, and you've mentioned to us, kind of off air, if you will, that you have a bit of a soft spot for our products, and I'm really curious to pick that apart because for such a DIY channel, it's even to us, it sometimes seems like that's an odd fit.
It is and it's not DIY. So on you have to think about the context of all of the other products in the market. And the context of other products in the market is that they're very appliance like, they're locked down, and they do what they do, and they do what they do well, but they don't really give you a ton of flexibility. And a lot of the time the price tag is an order of magnitude more than what Epiphan charges. So like the Pearl 2, the thing that really caught my attention with the Pearl 2 is that it was super flexible in terms of what it let you do, but anything that you couldn't do with it, it was actually reasonably well documented enough that you could throw your own interface in front of it. And it was pretty easy to program for as well. And that's doubly true of the Nano, because I think when I got the Nano, I emailed you guys. It was like, hey, this is a different API than the Pearl. What's going on? And it's like, oh yeah, here's the documentation for that. And then just in the documentation, it's like, create an SRT stream programmatically, connect to the thing, deploy the certificate, get the credentials. And so, it's got a perfectly functional web interface that you can use for whatever you want to do. But if you're going to deploy it as part of a larger solution, it gives you the flexibility that you could write whatever you want. Just for giggles, I stood up a Drupal module that could ingest footage from this, and it was like 5 or 6 hours of work. I mean, it wasn't a huge amount of work. And that's really useful if you use this as part of like a content creation workflow that ties in with other things. And I'm sure that that's not something that anybody in your product team has contemplated as a possible use, but it's something that otherwise somebody would be looking at like a capture card and a laptop, or a capture card and a desktop to try to fit that kind of a workflow. Mm-hmm. And then there's too many variables. Then instability can kind of creep in. I mean, our DIY solution for running our live streams and our news, it's a repurposed medical cart. Like we have a rolling medical cart that's got a monitor on it and a mixing board, and I've mounted all kinds of posts to it so I can put clamps on it for cameras and microphones and stuff like that. And it works pretty reasonably well as a teleprompter when we need that. And it's a very DIY solution. It's got a 14-core computer strapped to the back of it. It's got a UPS. But it's still... and it runs Linux because we can't trust Windows for these kinds of things. Good Lord. And it still falls short in a couple of ways for things that the Pearl 2 sort of solves pretty easily. So it's a really interesting sort of crossroads that the products are located at, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that's why we have 3 models in the Pearl line, and they're kind of designed to be that kind of one for what everybody's needs are. And you most recently reviewed the Nano, which we thank you for. It was an awesome review. When it was getting passed around our internal communications channels, everyone was just like, this is great, thumbs up. Everyone had super positive reactions to it, which is always awesome. But of course, you picked it apart, and like you said, you were able to get more out of it than maybe sometimes the average user, to be honest, might play with in terms of our expectation. But that means you probably have some different insights to it. So I'm really curious to hear, was there anything you didn't put in that review? Maybe some suggestions or how you've leveraged it in some of those ways that is particularly interesting, or maybe a little outside of the box, maybe towards the DIY camp.
I'm trying to think. It's been a while. It's been a while. I remember I'm really looking forward to the H.265 integration. I think that's going to be a little bit of a game changer in terms of some of the functionality.
Right.
I like the idea of there's a couple of rough edges in the web user interface side of it, but those things are sort of solved if you deal with it your own on the API side. When we were setting up for this live stream, you guys were messing with the audio and video latency, which is still something I struggle with in kind of a mixed environment. It's like, okay, my audio right now is coming through HDMI. That's the one way that I solve the problem. But there's actually a lot of flexibility with the Pearl Nano because you get the XLR and the RCA inputs. And you've got the options in the GUI for messing with the latency on that to sort of bring those back in line with one another. But sometimes on long streams, stuff like that, it can still be a little problematic by the end of the stream. It's like, okay, it's more out of sync than it was at the beginning of the stream. I don't really know what's going on. And I've noticed that as there have been software updates for the Pearl 2, that's been less of an issue. And I still have that problem with FFmpeg on Linux, and it's just like, So it's good. Somebody's on top of that on the product team, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking to evolve the product, right? And that's why we always ask for suggestions from whether it's people who have reviewed the product or whether it's our customers or people in chat who may have used a Pearl in the past. We're always listening and we want to improve the product and really kind of make sure that it can deliver the best things. And a bunch of people in chat right now are throwing some things out there which are very interesting. And one person's mentioning SRT.
That's what we're using.
It's what we're using for today's production, and it's something that all Pearl models support. Nano, it's one of the things. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and beat a dead horse on it, but it's one of the things I preach in marketing content for us all the time is that the Nano is an awesome SRT contribution encoder, right? Like, take whatever video feed you need and just let it do the heavy lifting of SRT. Someone also asked about the performance at like an 8 meg bit rate. On a Pearl, that's nothing. I mean, you could run it at 50 meg if you want. It's fine. So it's, they're great kind of pieces for that.
The setup for this stream for SRT was literally, it's the primary stream, so I turn it on and I hit the button, and then you guys are getting the SRT basically. I mean, how cool is that? It's also really cool for mailing people. So like in the pandemic world, it's like this is like so handy. If I had gotten this at the beginning of the pandemic, I totally would have FedExed this with a camera to people that I wanted to interview, and it was basically like plug it in, hit the stream button, and we're good to go. And that's hugely valuable versus some of the other stuff that I did with laptops, because I've done some of these interviews with these really high-level executives, and they've always got like the $10 like microphone thing. It's like, no, let me just mail you some stuff. Let's get it done properly.
Or the built-in webcam on the laptop pointed up their nose or whatever it is.
Why is this?
Yeah, it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough. But yeah, and I mean, to be honest, that's part of the idea with Nano as part of that product line is, put it in a kit, ship someone something pre-configured and let them just push the button. But,
take it out of the box, hit the button, and we're live. That's pretty powerful,
Anyway, so kind of moving on from that, because I'm sure we could talk about Nano all day, and I do love to, but that's not really what today's show is about.
It's fine.
And we do have some questions in chat asking about it. One person asking if Nano supports 4K inputs. Not today, but it will in the future. There's an update for that that will be coming in the future. It'll probably come along with H.265.
I'll also mention real quick the AVIO 4K. This is also one of the first Epiphan products that I had. And this has been really nice because I've been around the world with this 4 or 5 times. Like, this literally has more frequent flyer miles than probably most people will accrue in their lifetime. And all the live events that I've ever done and anything that I've done outside the United States, all of my video stuff was done with this. And it's basically plug and play. It works on Linux or Windows. It's useful. If I met somebody else, some other YouTuber or somebody else that was doing media, and it's like, hey, let's do it, a joint thing together and do it a live stream or do a whatever. This thing was probably the thing that was powering it. And most of the time you don't do 4K for a live stream, but you can do 4K and then scale it down to 1080p or a high bitrate 1080p, and that looks a lot better on YouTube than the native 1080p. So it's been super, super handy. I mean, you can tell it's been beaten all to crap, but even for this thing, I'm taking the camera that you're getting live, but then we're also using it with Zoom so we can communicate with each other that way. And it's the same feed, and it works great.
Yeah, yeah, no, they are, and like I said, you drag it around the world, they're pretty durable. You can kind of beat them up, and they just keep working.
Yeah.
So it's
It's hard to get that.
well, and that's part of our philosophy, right? Is we want it to work, but also keep working. So definitely a big thing there. But we kind of mentioned in there, you mentioned, live events and things like that. We know that, you guys don't do a ton of live streaming. You do it definitely here and there. Is that an intentional decision, or is that a result of the pandemic just kind of making things harder, or are there just other challenges that make that generally harder?
Yeah, everybody's schedule has definitely gotten super weird because of the pandemic. It's like we're going to do something at 2:00 on a Thursday, and it's like I don't even know if I'm going to be awake, at 2:00 on a Thursday, because the days and the nights, they all run together. It's not. It's returning to normal, but there were definitely times there where it was not great.
Oh, I totally get you. I forgot it was Thursday this morning when I got up. I don't even know anymore. People always think I'm still actually in our studio in the office. I'm not. I'm at home. I haven't been in the studio in 16 months. All the content we've been doing is from home. I just have a decent enough setup taking over a space in my house to make a little mini studio so I can do this stuff. But most people don't have that, and it makes it harder.
Yeah, we did try to set up more cameras and home stuff, and we've done a little bit of that with like game streaming, but that's really that doesn't require any setup, and it's not any kind of production. And I was watching some other live streams, and even just the intro for this program is way more effort in setup than we have done and put into a live stream. Usually when we live stream, it's a product launch that's like the embargo is up and it's really exciting, and then like we want to. But it's like, look, this is this amazing thing. You have to know this. There's this incredible thing going on. But we really need to put more work into doing live stream, and it also needs to be on our end more push button as making a video.
Right.
The tools are getting there. The tools were not there when we started, and the tools are getting there every day. And certainly, people are successful doing that.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because one of the ways that I think we're starting to see emerge a lot, and I think this came out of, a demand from the pandemic a little bit. I mean, a lot of things in the AV world, online and remote especially, changed very dramatically, almost overnight, arguably, at the start of the pandemic. And we saw some usage patterns and some technology changes and needs and people adapting and pivoting and all the other buzzwords. Things that for those of us in the industry might have had mapped out for 5 years, and then all of a sudden they were there in 5 days because people had to use it right now. But there were still certain things that didn't exist, and I think some of that's starting to emerge now. Now we've kind of created our own path, like we've already touched on, of leveraging sort of multi-point SRT, aggregate it in a place, mix, send it back out. But that's still kind of new. Not a lot of people doing that. And trying to make that easy is also a challenge. And starting to see more things go, like everything, but with the AV world especially, more things going towards the cloud along with everything else. Is that something that you've really looked at or played with? Or do you have a preference or idea of like cloud versus hardware, that kind of thing?
Well, we for some of the game streaming, the synchronization between like doing the audio synchronization was so tricky. But we had a really old video, where we set that up in the cloud, and it worked reasonably well. But it needed a lot of hardware, and you'd spool up the $10 an hour instance on Amazon EC2, which is a lot, and you would hopefully not forget to turn that off when you were done. And I'll come back to that aspect of it. But in the pandemic specifically, the best anecdote I have is I'm on kind of a technology steering and implementation committee, and my part of the committee is dealing with web technology and like scaling it and managing the programming aspects of that for a larger team. And it's a pretty big. There's a lot of C-level executives on that, and with my setup, normally we would meet in person like twice a year and just go over and set the budget and go over, and it's like, this is what we were working on, and
Right.
that kind of, it's executive boring business stuff. But we did it online, and I was the only one that had a DSLR. I was just using my YouTube setup for the meeting.
Right.
And, we had the meeting, and I noticed that, one of the executives was giving me, the side eye the whole time. I think. It's hard to tell with video conferencing. And he's like, hey, after the meeting, would you stick around for a second? It's like, sure. And, everybody had the up-the-nose webcam. And he's like, what kind of a laptop do you have? And it was like, oh, it's not a laptop. This is the setup. And it was this with, a camera plugged into my desktop machine. And he's like, just send me a list of the parts. And I was like, well, I mean, the camera, the lens. He's like, don't care. Just send me. Oh, okay. So I sent him the list of the camera and the tripod, and got him a Visa arm. And so, the very next meeting that we had, because there was a follow-up meeting after that, sometimes there were those. The very next meeting we had, he had the same setup, and his thing was crystal clear. And then, 3 months later, we had, the status meeting, and all of the executives had the same, crystal clear, they had, the bokeh, and it wasn't, the fake bokeh. It was they've got the lens on 2.8, and it's like, wow, every one of these executives bought, $1,500 worth of gear in order to do video conferencing. That's crazy.
Know what? And I've been in a lot of the exact same conversations. But you know what? When we're talking about executives or politicians or mainstream media people, like reporters, is there really an excuse not to do that? $1,500 in that type of scale is really not a lot of money, honestly.
Yeah. Well, everybody sounded a lot better.
Well, exactly. And I would say, the setup I use is actually a little less than that. It's very similar, except that, I use a Sony A5100.
Yep.
Kind of darling of that, right? I mean, that's something you could pick up $400 or $500, no problem.
Yep.
And then a Blue Yeti microphone. Okay, that's $100, right? I mean, $600 and I'm basically ready to go. Plus a capture card, which of course as a company that makes those, I didn't have to put any expense into that. But, again, you can do that fairly inexpensively as well. And before you know it, that it changes the game completely in terms of the quality that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
And also frees you to do more creative things and really kind of make things better. And that's where I'm interested, that it seems like, I'm super happy that it sounds like you work with a group that gets it and did it.
It was weird. It was definitely weird. Nobody was like, oh yeah, let's get this for the staff. It was like, I want to, it's like a little bit, maybe a little bit more American Psycho and a little bit, I don't know. The paper is amazing.
I'm sure you've seen it too, though. You just look around the world and, we're 16 months or whatever into it, and there's still people who don't get it. And the quality of what they're putting out is just...
Yeah.
I don't have very many kind words for it anyway.
I don't. The trend that I've noticed too in some content creation circles is to make it look like it came from a cell phone, but there's so much post-production there. It's crazy. And it's like, oh, okay, we're going to upload that to TikTok, or we're going to upload that as a YouTube short. And it's like, this did not come from a cell phone. This is bananas.
Yeah. And I'm not sure that and maybe that's just, a generational thing, but I don't really get that. I mean, I'm not a TikTok person. I'm not.
We don't either. Don't worry.
It's I want to see actual quality video, and I want more importantly than anything, I want to hear quality audio, because you can get away with some video, but audio needs to be on point, or else you're just not effective at delivering the messaging.
Yeah.
So that's important too. But kind of coming back to the cloud idea a little bit, is that, you mentioned you're in the steering committee. Is that something that's been coming up in that kind of enterprise area, like trying to figure out how to decentralize some of this stuff?
No, I would say it's such a nascent market that they don't even know that, there's a product that could approach some of that, because it's just, what does Zoom do, or what does Microsoft Teams do? And it's like, well, Teams isn't really going to do this. I mean, even doing this on Skype, you would have to have the weird proprietary plugin, and it was a huge pain. And in the olden days, we were trying to DIY it and bypass everything, and there was H.264, and H.264 was not appropriate because latency and a lot of the H.265 and, more importantly, SRT sort of were, a lot of the stuff in that technology is to directly address those shortcomings in H.264. And so, video switching capacity in the cloud, it's weird because GPU acceleration is handy because it lowers the latency sometimes, but that costs the most in the cloud. But there are some ways you can do it with CPU, if you kind of cheat and have each client do its own thing. But yeah, some, specialty cloud video conferencing solutions and server endpoints to do stuff. I mean, certainly we had a lot of traffic on that video, and it's something we want to revisit in the future to do. If you're going to DIY it, here's maybe how you would do it. Right. But, some of the cloud costs for that as it is now is astronomical. I mean, the kind of cloud hosting that you need for, a 3-hour stream is going to cost you $20-$30.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because, we do this setup for these shows and our webinars where, even like you are right now, sending SRT to us, I'm sending SRT, and our producer's doing all the work in the back end, on a Perl 2, basically mixing us together and then sending it back out to YouTube and Facebook. And it's like, we're basically doing it in an all hardware solution, but does it have to be? I think is one of the funny questions. And I think that's maybe one of the emerging trends that, certainly I think it's an interesting thought piece, because, we keep hearing about all this idea of hybrid events, whether that's within education of a mix of online versus in-person classes, or maybe is that the future of other events like trade shows? Like, no one's figured that out yet perfectly.
Yeah.
People have tried, often failed.
Yeah, the virtual trade shows that I did over the last year, they were not especially memorable.
No. Well, if they were, it was for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Some of the ones I've seen, man, that was rough. So, we'll see as we start getting back to in-person events, right? What happens there. It'll be curious to see, but yeah, it's always interesting to think about those things, and you guys being such a DIY kind of channel, it's fun to think about experimenting with this stuff. But I guess that ties into a little bit of what's the future for Level 1? What's the future of content creation on YouTube in your perspective, in the way things have been going?
I don't know. I think the community is the thing that's powerful, and it's it's the will of the people. I don't really subscribe too much to the will of the algorithm, and the algorithm definitely punishes us for that. But fortunately, a lot of our fans make up for that, in supporting us on Patreon and Floatplane and with our merchandise and all of the other fun ways that there exist to support Level 1. And,
Right.
A lot of it, I would say that we haven't 100% figured out yet. And that's sort of the adventure. So, like, that part of it, our audience is sort of along with us for the ride. It's like, what's today's problem? Well, today's problem is trying to figure out how to utilize, 128 cores or 80 cores or whatever in this server, because that is an insane amount of horsepower, and it's going to trickle down, before too long. What do we need to do to make SQL go faster? What do we need to do to make the web server go faster? What do we need to do to make the developers' lives easier? I don't know. Let's sort of figure it out. So the only consistent feature of all of our content is just our passion for figuring out a particular something, and it can be very small or niche, or it could be very large and grandiose and covering technology news and that kind of thing. But it's like, will we be to 15 million subs in 5 years? No, we're fringe, but it's fine.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned there, it's like, do you need to anymore, considering there are these other paths of revenue to keep generating content? Because let's be honest, like anything else, it's a business, and you can't run a business without revenue. You can't keep making content without it. But you mentioned a couple of others like Patreon, and of course Floatplane has some options along those lines as well. How important is that, to Level 1 at this point? I mean, I'm sure everyone has heard about YouTube adpocalypse and all of these different generations of that.
Yeah, YouTube is really good for, well, historically has been really good for discovery, and it still remains pretty good for discovery because a lot of people are on YouTube. But I don't think that the algorithm is very sophisticated, and often it gets a lot of things wrong. But they're maximizing ad revenue and watch time, and unfortunately, if you're a technology channel, a lot of people run ad blockers, and that's fine. But the algorithm is going to look at that and be like, that's weird. We didn't get any ad revenue for those things, so let's just not promote that. And it's it's not.
The flip side to that is that the algorithm's looking for ad revenue for YouTube, not for you, the creator.
That is exactly right. So It's nice to having the audience support though, and the audience support really frees us to do a lot of things that would otherwise not be. It's really freeing because I look at a lot of peers that are full-time YouTubers, and there's an incredible, almost crushing amount of pressure on them to produce content and feed the algorithm and make a living.
Right.
And because we have the level of support that we do from our fan base, we don't really worry about it as much, which maybe isn't great for the long term, but it's probably okay. And that's very freeing in terms of, mental health and the psychological aspect of it, I think, because if I were, waking up tomorrow and depending on it is like, oh, ultimately Google, is what I depend on for my living, I would, I don't know that I would have confidence in that going forward. But having, diversified sources, it definitely makes sense. And you can see that from the huge YouTubers. They're like, I'm not going to count on YouTube. I'm going to stand up all this other revenue generating stuff. Good move.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes you have to ask, is there anything wrong with just being happy where you are? So if you're getting to do what you want and you're enjoying it and loving it. And to be honest, putting out great content like you guys do, that's probably rewarding enough.
Sometimes it's fun to just share the happiness. It's also really incredibly awesome when people do something and post it on our forums. And it's like, look at this amazing thing that I did. It's like, I built this thing, and it's really just incredible. We had a lot of people that like Threadripper Pro launched, and it was a Lenovo only thing, and I'm sure they sold a bunch. But then there were a bunch of people that sort of DIY'd a Threadripper Pro system. And Threadripper Pro is more like a server than a desktop. And so there's some gotchas. It's like you can build a computer before, but when you build a server, things get weird. Things like, I just want to go update the BIOS. And it's like, well, you don't update the BIOS through the BIOS. The correct way, most correct way, is to update the BIOS through the out-of-band management interface. And what? And so a lot of people did their builds, and some people had problems, and they came to the forums. And it was really awesome to see pics of their build, and also to know what problems they're solving and things like that. I can gather experience and live vicariously through other people that are doing really amazing, incredible things. And so I can benefit from their experience if it's detailed enough, and then contribute that to sort of the overall pool of knowledge, which is awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I think we, as outside observers to some extent, one of the things I think we love about you guys is that your community is so strong. It's so active, and that's great. And it's one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, was to kind of, share your community with ours. I mean, we have the other the other flip side of being freeing, is that as a corporate entity, we don't have to monetize our channel because that's not the objective. So it doesn't really matter. We do this to help our own community to an extent, and to help our customers and our partners and other communities of those who join us share a lot of information. And I'm seeing a lot of chat back and forth on YouTube, which is awesome. That's exactly what I love to see. I love to look down and just see all this chat of people go back and forth recommending this thing and that thing, and enjoying lots of different stuff. Which is
welcome, computer janitors great. And aspiring computer janitors. We understand your pain and suffering, and we're here to commiserate.
Exactly. That was more of me in a past life. I do less of that janitor work now, but yeah, certainly that's.
You never really truly get away from the janitorial work.
No, that's true. Just the other day, someone was like, got to buy a laptop for a new employee. What do you think? It's like, oh boy, here we go down the rabbit hole. So, yeah, that's always a fun game that really, has to be done.
It's just at a higher level. I mean, it's like, we're going to build a computer. Okay, that's low level janitorial. We're going to build a computer made from only the finest error correcting memory, and it's just super high end. And you got to do this crazy thing to control the fans or flash the BIOS. It's like, okay, that's janitorial stuff, but it's still, it's like up here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is great, Wendell. I really appreciate your time today. I'm just going to look through chat here a little bit and see if there were any. There's a lot of questions about Epiphan Perl products. I don't want to eat up too much time on those. Some of them we did address. Some of them our moderators answered in chat. I just want to remind people, if you do have any questions about Epiphan products, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can send us an email at info@epiphan.com. You can jump on our website at epiphan.com and use our live chat feature. And everyone on my support team would be more than happy to help any questions you have about the products. Don't want to eat up too much time here today with that. And of course, we make a range of products. Wendell mentioned the AVIO 4K. That's one of our USB-based capture cards. We have an SDI version. We have one that's for HD that actually has a DVI interface, which means it's a little more flexible for things like even VGA or HDMI or DVI. And then the AVIO 4K is there for 4K capture. The Pearl, there's 3 different models in there that some people noticed. So basically small, medium, large, depending on what you need. There's a fit for everyone, I think. And there's no wrong answers, I think.
Yeah. I'll also say that, for the toe in the water, the AVIO 4K does work really well with like Open Broadcaster. So you can combine that with Open Broadcaster's scenes and like the ability to do stuff. And you're depending on the machine a little bit in order to do that. But with OBS, it has like a virtual camera now. Yeah. And like for that executive use case where it's like maybe I want to like fade between my screen and a camera, you can do all of that, and it works fabulously well with the AVIO 4K. And it's one of the few USB captures that tends not to drop out or do weird stuff as long as you use the cable that it came with or an otherwise good USB 3 A to B cable, and you've got it plugged into a good USB 3 port on your host computer. That matters a lot.
Yeah.
Most people don't realize that it's like USB. I was helping somebody the other day with a first-gen Threadripper. And first-gen Threadripper, there are 2 USB ports that are directly from the CPU, and then there's a bunch of USB ports that come from the chipset, and then there's more USB ports usually that have been added in by whoever designed the motherboard on an external controller. And for anything like this, those 2 USB ports that go directly into the CPU, those are the ones you want to use. Sometimes they're the front panel, sometimes they're on the back panel. You got to play fine to the USB port, and they're, some computer designs are like that. You got to, 6th and 7th gen Intel, they also had problems. X299 when it launched, similar problems. Where's the USB port routed?
Those first generation USB 3, third-party controllers were just terrible.
I'm going to capture video with one of those. No, you're not.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty rough. Those. I'm glad we're past that now, at least for the most part. But funny enough, you mentioned that it's like now there's this shift away from desktops more towards laptops, but. So there's kind of similar limitations when you get to laptops. It's like, are all these external ports shared? I don't know. Let's find out. And you got to play the game a little bit.
This thing that looks like USB-C is not what you want. You want to use this other one over here that also looks exactly the same, but works completely differently electrically.
Yeah. All the good times.
Again, you were a janitor and you didn't even know it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, my day-to-day job is managing our support team. So, yes, it is still a lot of that work.
That's basically the equivalent of somebody flushing a cherry bomb.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. So it's some great chat in here. Ew, VGA, please let it die. I'm with you on that. But surprisingly, there's a lot of stuff out there, especially on the industrial side or the medical side, where we do a lot of business still, that's still VGA based. And so I agree. I wish they say it's dead. It's not yet.
It's not.
Hopefully, maybe at some point. But there's still a lot of industrial reasons for it to exist. And so I still have to think about it every now and then.
Yeah, VGA is not going anywhere anytime soon, sadly.
Sadly. There's everything about it that sucks, but yeah, it's still going to take a while. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Again, Wendell, where can people find you? And what do you have in store? What's the next big project?
Level of the number1techs.com or youtube.com/level and the number1techs or @TechWendell on Twitter. You can just Google Level 1 Wendell and probably find me. It's totally fine. In terms of big videos coming up, I've got a dual 80-core Intel Xeon system that I've got full benchmarks on, and it's going to be interesting to see how that faces off with the dual 64-core AMD Epic server. So it's the battle of the titans. There's some really interesting results. I mean, there's a few where there's not a clear-cut winner, and there's a few where it's. Yeah, and there's a few where it's like, oh, this is clearly the right choice, and there's a few where it's like, oh, it's the other choice for this benchmark. It just depends on what you're doing. It's really really some pretty interesting stuff. And then a fun hobby project is this PDP-11, where this is in editing right now, but I've constructed a model PDP-11, which is functional. This is one of the first computers that could run what we would consider modern day Unix. And you can, program. It's also one of the last computers where you could do something meaningful through like the front panel input. And so like I've literally just set an address register for where I want it to jump to and start executing code, which would, reboot it and boot it into a new operating system basically because of the storage that I have. The PDP-11 was made from like 1970 until 1995. So it's a very long-lived mini computer is what they were called. But that'll be that's not normally the kind of content that we do. That was just something that was fun and exciting because it's Unix and it's our Unix roots.
Yeah.
It's sort of the great grandfather of a lot of the Unix ideas that are in Linux came from that. So it's pretty exciting stuff.
So people in chat looked like they were pretty excited about that because it's something that you don't see too much. So that's always great. And I guess definitely. It's fun to always look back at that stuff too, right? It's the nostalgia factor is there. I mean, I had mentioned in our pre-show stuff the other day, somewhere in my closet I have my Osborne Portable, which is as old as I am. Was my first computer, still works. Hard drives didn't exist. You had to use dual floppies, one for the OS, one for your program kind of thing. But there's something about those. These
are the EPIC CPUs not currently in a benchmark system. The other ones, there's a lot more. Yeah, but they're just we're it's epic. The whole channel's epic. EPIC, not. I don't know.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us, Wendell. We really appreciate your time today. Thanks everyone for watching in chat. Our next episode will be July 29th, I think, but I'll be on vacation, so I don't know what's happening, and I'm just gonna, pretend that something else is happening. I don't know. Not on me. So that should be interesting. But we're here every other Thursday doing Live at Epiphan, talking about something to do usually with streaming or streaming adjacent things. Sometimes we're just talking about what's recent in the news and stuff like that. So join us, hit the subscribe button and join us for any of those chats. We really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, as I mentioned earlier, please reach out to info@epiphan.com is the email address with suggestions, comments, questions, whatever you got, we're listening. And hopefully we will see you on the next one. And, all the likes and follows of the social stuff, or whatever you feel like. So thanks, Wendell, once again.
Thank you.
And we will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.
See ya.